Commander stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the readings from 7. The planet below was dying. Its atmosphere burned with toxic gases that could kill most species in minutes. The mines had been abandoned 10 years ago when the planet became too dangerous. No one went to 7 anymore. No one was supposed to be alive down there. Then the distress signal came through. Heard it crackling on the communications channel. A human voice. The words were broken and weak, but the meaning was clear. Someone was alive on that dead world and they were asking for help. The commander did not move. His kind did not rescue humans. Humans were a young species, barely spacefaring, living on a single planet that the Empire had marked on maps but never visited. They were not worth the fuel to save. They were not worth the time. This was the way, and it had been the way for 3,000 years. Looked at the data again. The human had been broadcasting the signal for 17 hours. The voice sounded tired but alive. The coordinates put the signal in the old mining sector, where the ground was unstable and the sky rained acid. "Sir," said his navigator, a young named, "the atmospheric conditions are worsening. If anyone is down there, they will die soon." Nodded slowly. He knew this. He could calculate the time. The human had perhaps 2 hours before the chemical storms would make rescue impossible. After that, it would be too late. He should order the ship to move on. That was the correct choice. That was what the Council would expect him to do. That was what he had done 3 times before when distress signals came from weaker species. But something was different this time. Had never heard a human voice before. It did not sound different from other species, but something in the way it called for help was unusual. There was no begging in the voice. There was no panic. The human was simply stating facts, saying goodbye, accepting death. The human sounded like a soldier facing the end with strength. "Prepare the rescue shuttle," said, "and get me a suit that can handle the conditions below." "Commander," said carefully, "the Council will ask questions." "Then they will ask questions," replied. He stood from his chair. "Send a message to the military base. Tell them I am responding to a distress signal. I will file the proper reports." The shuttle descended through clouds of brown and yellow gas, sat alone in the pilot's seat, guiding the small craft toward the mining coordinates. Below him, the ground moved and shifted as earthquakes rumbled through the planet's crust. The acid rain hit the shuttle's windows like bullets of fire. His suit was strong and would protect him for perhaps 30 minutes in those conditions. He had to find the human and leave in less than that time, or he would die too. The signal grew stronger, landed the shuttle on a flat piece of rock and checked his suit readings. Everything was sealed. He opened the hatch and stepped out into a world that tried to kill him with every breath his suit took. The mining complex loomed through the haze of toxic air. The buildings were old and falling apart. Acid had eaten through the metal walls, leaving holes that showed darkness inside. Moved quickly toward the strongest signal point, his boots crunching on ground that crumbled beneath him. A sound reached him through the suit's external speakers, a voice calling out. The human had heard the shuttle land. Found him in a collapsed tunnel near the main shaft. A man badly injured, his leg pinned under a metal support beam. The human's face was covered in blood, but his eyes were alert and clear. When he saw, he did not look afraid. He looked relieved. "You came," the human said in broken. "I did not think anyone would come." "Stay still," said. He moved to the metal beam and assessed the situation. The human's leg was badly crushed. Moving him would cause pain. The human would likely die anyway, even with medical treatment, but did not think about this. He simply acted. The metal beam was heavy but was strong. He positioned himself under it and pushed with all his strength. His suit's sensors screamed warnings at him about the strain, but the beam moved. It shifted just enough. "Pull yourself back," commanded. The human dragged himself backward, away from the falling debris. The beam crashed to the ground where he had been lying. Lifted the human onto his shoulders. The pain made the human cry out, but he did not fight or resist. He simply accepted the help. "I am David Cooper," the human said as carried him through the toxic corridors. "I was the mining supervisor. My team got out. I waited to make sure they all left. Then the quake happened. I got trapped. I thought I would die here." "Your team escaped?" asked. "Yes, they made it to the settlement. They evacuated on the last ship before the planet became too dangerous. I was the last one here. I stayed too long checking the systems, making sure the shutdown was safe." Understood something in that moment. David had stayed behind so others could live. This human had chosen to die so his people would survive. The human had not called for rescue expecting help. The human had called for rescue as a last hope, not believing anyone would answer. But had answered. The shuttle's interior was hot when they entered, sealed the hatch behind them, and initiated the ascent sequence. David lay on the emergency medical bed, his body shaking from pain and shock. The suit's scanner showed how badly injured David was. The leg would heal, but it would take time. More importantly, the human had internal injuries that would require real medical care. As the shuttle broke through the planet's atmosphere, David looked at with conscious eyes. "Why did you come?" David asked. "Your kind does not rescue humans, I know this. Everyone knows this. You could have ignored the signal." Did not have a good answer. He could not explain why he had disobeyed protocol. He could not explain why he had risked his career for a stranger from a weak species that meant nothing in the galactic power structure. "Because you called," said simply, "and because you stayed so others could live." David smiled through the pain. "We will remember this. Humans remember kindness from the stars." Took the shuttle toward the nearest neutral station. He did not know that David's words would prove true. He did not know that this moment would change everything. He only knew that he had done something that felt right, even if it violated everything the Empire stood for. David Cooper's story spread faster than anyone expected. He told it to the station commanders who received him. They told it to their superiors. Within days, the narrative had reached Earth through official military channels and faster through direct communication networks. A human had been rescued by a commander. Not just any rescue, but a rescue that violated protocol, that risked a military officer's career, that everything known about society and their complete indifference to weaker species. Media caught the story and exploded it into headlines across every human news network. "Alien shows compassion," the broadcasts shouted. "Humanity not alone in the galaxy," they declared. Interview requests flooded David's secure communication channel. He was in a medical facility on Station 7, recovering from his injuries, but no one cared about his physical condition. They wanted to know about. They wanted to know why an alien who could have ignored him chose to save him instead. David told the story truthfully, 100 times to 100 different people. He described the acid rain. He described his leg pinned under the metal beam. He described the moment the shuttle appeared through the toxic haze like an angel. And he described words, the ones that mattered most. "Because you called, and because you stayed so others could live." The human government responded with official statements. The United Earth Council issued a formal acknowledgement of actions. They began diplomatic negotiations to contact the Empire directly. For the first time in human history, Earth was going to speak to one of the major galactic powers as something other than an insignificant observer. But across space, the response was very different. Returned to his military base to face immediate questioning. The council sent representatives personally to interrogate him. Their voices were cold when they demanded explanations. "Commander, you violated direct protocol," said Vex, a tall with a voice that could cut through steel. "You risked a military vessel on a primitive species. You wasted resources that could have been used for the Empire. You disobeyed standing orders that clearly state forces do not conduct rescue operations for species ranked below technological level 8. Stood at attention during the entire interrogation. He did not argue, he did not defend himself, he simply accepted the criticism. "The human called for help," said. "I had the ability to answer that call. To do nothing would have made me complicit in his death." Vex leaned back in his chair. The other exchanged glances that could not read. "You knew this was against protocol," Vex said. "You knew there would be consequences, yet you acted anyway. Do you understand what you have done? You have elevated a primitive species in the eyes of the galaxy. You have suggested that human lives matter to Empire. You have potentially weakened our position." "The human's life mattered because he was alive," replied. "I did not save him to make a political statement. I saved him because it was the right choice." The council dismissed him with warnings and restrictions. They suspended him from active duty for 2 months. They placed restrictions on his communications. They made it clear that any further violations would result in military discharge, but they did not remove him from service entirely. Understood this. They could not remove him because too many people had already heard what he had done. What surprised was the flood of messages he began to receive. Anonymous messages at first, then messages with names. Other officers expressing support. Scientists saying they agreed with his decision. young soldiers saying his actions had given them hope. The Empire had a secret underbelly of people who disagreed with the official indifference to other species' suffering. Was not alone in his beliefs, he had simply been the first to act. On Earth, David made a decision. He would return to his normal life, but he would also become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the stars. He worked with the United Earth Council to open diplomatic channels. He learned everything about culture, history, and values. He practiced the language until he could speak it fluently. He was preparing himself for a future he could not predict but could feel approaching. The messages he received from came through encrypted channels. The commander could not communicate openly, not without risking further punishment, but he could message David directly through private networks. "The council is divided," wrote in one message. "Your story has affected us more than the leadership will admit. There are who believe contact with your species could strengthen us, not weaken us. There are who think our indifference to suffering has made us weak and empty. The rescue you experienced is becoming something larger than either of us intended." David replied with his own thoughts, his own hopes. He told about the global meetings. He told him about the volunteers who wanted military training. He told him about factories being converted to build spacecraft. Humanity was preparing for something, though no one was quite sure what. Months passed. The diplomatic negotiations between Earth and the Empire became formal and official, was brought back to duty because his role in the initial contact made him valuable. He became the primary negotiator with the human delegation. The man who broke protocol was now the bridge between two species. In their first official meeting, and David stood face to face in a neutral conference room on Station 7. The cameras and officials had left them alone for a moment of privacy. "You changed everything," David said simply. "One decision, one rescue, and now look at us." "Considered this? You changed everything first," he replied. "You stayed behind so your people could live. I simply recognized that choice and it." "The galaxy is watching us now," David said. "They are wondering what happens when humans and work together. They are wondering if this alliance means something real or if it is just politics." Nodded slowly. "Then we have to show them that it means something real. We have to prove that compassion is not weakness. We have to prove that saving a life can start something that echoes across worlds." Neither of them knew that proving this would require everything from both their species. Neither of them the message came through the military communications network as a formal declaration. The Dominion, a coalition of alien species that controlled a third of the known galaxy, had issued an ultimatum. The words were brief and left no room for negotiation. "The Empire will immediately cease all contact with the human species designated as Earth natives. Any further alliance or cooperation with this primitive civilization will be considered an act of war against the Dominion collective. Humans represent genetic contamination of superior species. Contact with them will weaken the galaxy's strength. You have 30 cycles to comply. After that time, military action will commence against all holdings in the eastern sector." Read the message 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. The Dominion was not asking. They were not negotiating. They were telling the Empire to abandon humanity or face invasion. The Council held an emergency session. Vex and the others debated for hours about how to respond. Some argued for compliance. They said humanity was not worth fighting for, that the humans were indeed a young and untested species, that the cost of war was too high. Others argued against surrendering to threats, saying the Dominion would simply make new demands after humanity was abandoned. Sat in the military section, listening but not speaking. He knew what needed to happen. He did not know if the Council would agree, but he understood what the right choice was. Finally, he stood and addressed the Council directly. "Humans are not contamination," he said. "I have seen their strength. They do not have our technology or our military might, but they have something that has been missing from the galaxy for a long time. They have the ability to care for each other. They have the ability to hope. The Dominion fears this because fear destroys hope. If we abandon humanity to prove our strength, we prove the Dominion is right about us. We prove that compassion is weakness." Vex looked at him with a mixture of anger and recognition. "You speak like someone who sees a future different from ours," Vex said. "I do," replied. "I see a future where humans and rebuild the galaxy into something better. The Dominion sees strength only in conquest and fear. We can show them something different." The Council voted. It was not unanimous, but it was clear. The Empire would not comply with the Dominion's ultimatum. They would stand with humanity. The message was sent to Earth immediately. David received it in his secure office at United Earth Command Center. He read it once, then sat silently for a long time. Humanity had just been given a choice. They could surrender their new alliance and live in obscurity, or they could fight for a future they had only begun to imagine. David contacted every leader on Earth. He called the presidents, the generals, the scientists. He assembled them in emergency session. He told them about the Dominion's threat. He told them about the Council's decision to stand with humanity, and he told them what he believed Earth needed to do. "We can run," David said. "We can hide on our planet and pretend this never happened. The Dominion might not even bother with us if they withdraw. But if we do that, we prove that we are exactly what the Dominion said we are. We prove that humans are too weak to deserve a place among the stars." The room was silent. Then a general named Foster stood up. "I say we fight," Foster said. "We fight because it is right. We fight because they showed us that strength comes from more than just weapons. We fight to prove that humanity can stand." One by one, leaders around the world agreed. Some did so with confidence, others with fear, but all of them understood what was being asked. Earth transformed in days. Factories that had been producing consumer goods shifted to manufacturing defensive systems and weapons. Universities became research centers focused on military applications. Training camps opened across every continent. Volunteers stepped forward in numbers that stunned even the military commanders. Humans understood they were fighting for survival, and they were willing to give everything. Scientists worked with military advisors to create weapons that combined technology with human innovation. The humans brought something they had not anticipated. They brought creative problem-solving. They brought the ability to improvise with limited resources. They brought determination that came from desperation and hope. The first attack came without warning. A Dominion fleet appeared in Earth orbit and began bombardment of human military installations. Was on a warship in the sector, and he immediately coordinated Earth's defense. Missiles launched from Earth's surface toward the Dominion ships above. Fighters joined the battle, flying alongside human interceptors. That was when the galaxy witnessed something it had never seen before, and human soldiers fighting side by side, not as master and servant but as equals. Both of them determined to survive, both of them willing to die for the other. A human pilot named Sarah Miller flew an older Earth fighter in patterns that the Dominion had never encountered. She used the planet's gravity and atmosphere in ways that seemed to bend physics. She disabled 3 Dominion combat vessels before her ship was damaged beyond repair. She ejected and was recovered by a rescue shuttle. A warrior named fought on the ground with a human squad that was defending a power station. When the humans began to fall, stood between them and the Dominion soldiers, buying time for evacuation. The humans saw his sacrifice and understood that their new allies were committed to protecting them. The first battle was brutal and costly. The Dominion lost ships but inflicted heavy damage on both human and forces. When the Dominion fleet finally retreated to regroup, both species understood the truth. This was only the beginning. The Dominion would return with greater force. And David met on a neutral station to assess the damage and plan strategy. "We will be tested again," said. "The Dominion will not accept this resistance. They will return and they will come with everything they have." David nodded. "Then we prepare, we rebuild, we strengthen the alliance, and we show the galaxy that humans are not weak. We show them that we have something the Dominion will never understand." "What is that?" asked. "We believe in each other," David replied. "That is our strength, that is what will defeat them." The preparations began immediately. Both species poured resources into the coming conflict. The Galax Earth became the strategic center of everything. Military command centers were built underground. Factories operated around the clock, producing weapons and supplies that filled cargo ships bound for ports and allied worlds. The planet that had once been isolated and unknown to the galaxy had become the heart of a growing resistance against the Dominion's tyranny. David Cooper became the unofficial coordinator of human war efforts. He worked with military leaders, scientists, and factory directors to ensure that every available resource was directed toward the conflict. He was no longer just a survivor of a mining accident. He was humanity's voice on the galactic stage, the person who negotiated alliances and convinced other species that fighting alongside humans and was their path to freedom. The Empire provided military advisors and combat veterans to train human soldiers, but they learned quickly that humans brought something unexpected to warfare. Humans did not think like other species. They improvised. They took broken equipment and made it work. They took tactics that seemed impossible and executed them with precision. They took fear and transformed it into determination. A human general named Robert Hayes led the charge in transforming Earth's military. He worked with commanders to create a hybrid fighting force that used both species' strengths, brought discipline and advanced technology. Humans brought creativity and willingness to accept casualties to achieve objectives. Together, they created something formidable. Other species began to notice what was happening. Species that had been oppressed by the Dominion, forced to pay taxes and tributes, forbidden from developing their own military capabilities, saw an opportunity. They sent delegations to Earth. They came to witness the alliance between and humans, and many of them decided to join. The Aryan species, aquatic beings who had been subjected to Dominion control for 300 years, sent their navy to support the alliance. The merchant collective, which had been forbidden from profiting from their own resources, committed to supplying the military campaigns. A species of scientists and engineers offered technology innovations that would change how warfare was conducted. David worked with representatives from all these species. He sat in conferences where beings from 100 different worlds discussed strategy and shared fears about the coming conflict. He learned that the galaxy was full of species that wanted freedom but had lost hope of ever achieving it. This act of saving a human and humanity's decision to stand and fight had given everyone hope again. Months passed, the alliance grew stronger. Ships from dozens of worlds arrived at Earth's orbital shipyards for repairs and retrofitting. The stations in Earth's system became the busiest places in the known galaxy. Soldiers from alien species trained alongside human troops. Alien scientists worked with human engineers to develop new defensive systems. And then the scouts brought news that made everyone understand the true scale of what was coming. The Dominion was mobilizing its entire military force, not just the fleet that had attacked before, but capital ships that had not been deployed in centuries. The Dominion was treating this conflict like an existential threat to their power. They were going to commit everything to destroying the Alliance and crushing humanity and the Empire. The attack came on a morning when most of Earth was still asleep. The Dominion fleet appeared in orbit, thousands of ships arranged in formations designed to devastate the planet below. Orbital stations that had been built to defend Earth detected them first. Emergency sirens erupted across every continent. Humans and their alien allies moved with practiced precision. Soldiers rushed to battle stations. Factories shifted from production to secure mode. Civilians who had been trained as emergency responders moved to shelters. Every person on Earth understood that this was the moment they had been preparing for. This was the day that would determine whether humanity would survive as a free species or be crushed beneath the Dominion's boot. The first waves of Dominion fighters came down through Earth's atmosphere. They were intercepted by human and allied aircraft. The battles raged in Earth skis. A human pilot named James Porter flew his fighter into the teeth of Dominion fire, protecting a formation of transport ships carrying evacuating scientists. His sacrifice allowed the transports to escape. He did not eject. He simply made sure others lived. On the ground, human soldiers commanded by General Hayes held defensive positions against Dominion landing forces. The soldiers were younger than the warriors who fought beside them, but they fought with ferocity that surprised everyone. They had something the Dominion soldiers did not have. They had hope. In the command center beneath Earth's surface, David watched the battle unfold, stood beside him, coordinating the response. Their eyes met for a moment, and both of them understood that this was the culmination of everything that had begun when a shuttle landed on 7. "Your species is remarkable," said, watching human soldiers charge a Dominion position against overwhelming odds. "They are scared," David replied. "They are scared, but they are fighting anyway. That is what humans do. When we are afraid, we move forward, not backward." The battle raged for hours. Dominion forces pushed deeper into Earth, but they could not achieve the total victory they sought. They controlled parts of the planet, but they did not control the will of the people living there. Humans and their alien allies fought in cities and forests and mountains. They fought with guns and with improvised weapons. They fought to protect their families, their homes, their future. A turning point came when human engineers managed to disable a Dominion capital ship by planting explosives at exactly the right spot. They had no advanced technology for this task. They had maps and courage and understanding of structural weakness. They had human ingenuity. The capital ship fell from orbit and crashed into the ocean, taking 1,000 Dominion soldiers with it. After 16 hours of continuous combat, the Dominion began to retreat. Their forces had suffered losses they had not anticipated. Their weapons had been less effective than expected against a species that had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Their soldiers, accustomed to easy victories over weaker species, had never faced opposition like this. As the Dominion fleet pulled back, preparing to leave Earth orbit, celebrations erupted across the planet. Humans emerged from shelters and cheered. Warriors joined them in the streets. Aryan pilots landed their ships and walked among humans as equals. Merchants opened their cargo holds to provide food and medicine to the injured and displaced. Earth had survived. More than that, Earth had proven itself. The young species had stood against the oldest power in the galaxy and had not broken. The planet that had once been unknown and insignificant had become a symbol of resistance and hope. David stood on the observation deck of a station in Earth orbit, looking down at the planet below. The sun was setting on one side, casting the continents into shadow and light. "What happens now?" asked. David considered the question. "Now we rebuild, we treat the wounded, we honor those who died, and we prepare for what comes next." "The Dominion will return," said. "They cannot accept this defeat. They must respond or their power will crumble." "Then we will be ready," David replied, "because Earth has risen and we will not fall again." The first battle was over, but the war for the galaxy's future was just beginning. The final battle began at dawn across 3 different theaters of war. In Earth orbit, a massive fleet of Dominion warships emerged from jump points, each vessel larger and more powerful than anything that had come before. In the outer system, defenders positioned themselves to intercept. Across Earth's surface, cities prepared their defensive systems for what everyone knew would be the ultimate test. The Dominion had committed everything, not just their military, but the entire economic power of their civilization. They had invested centuries in building ships and weapons. They had invested empires in maintaining control over 1/3 of the galaxy. They could not allow a young species from an insignificant planet to threaten all of that, so they came with everything. But they had underestimated something fundamental about humans and their allies. David stood in the command center beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by displays showing data from 1,000 different points across the planet and beyond. Beside him, tactical officers worked alongside human military commanders. On the screens, he could see human interceptors launching from bases across every continent. He could see fighters taking positions in space. He could see allied species ships arriving from across the galaxy, each one adding their strength to the defense. "They are beginning atmospheric penetration," a human officer named Grace reported, her voice steady despite the pressure of what was happening above their heads. "Defensive Grid Alpha is responding." The first Dominion bombardment hit Earth's atmosphere like a meteor shower of destruction. Ground-based defense systems that human scientists had created, combined with technology and innovations from allied species, rose to meet the assault. Laser arrays targeted incoming aircraft. Missile defense systems calculated trajectories and launched counterstrikes. The sky above Earth became a battlefield. A fighter pilot named Vex flew defensive patterns that protected a human settlement. His ship was older, but it was fast. He used that speed to outmaneuver Dominion fighters that were more powerful but less agile. 2 Dominion jets fell to his weapons before a missile struck his ship. He ejected and landed in a human city. Soldiers who had been trained to work with aliens caught him and took him to shelter. Together, human and they prepared to defend the city on the ground. Above the planet, a human aerospace engineer named sat in the cockpit of a fighter that was faster than anything humans had built before. It was fast because engineers had helped design it. It was maneuverable because human pilots had demanded features that designers initially thought were impossible. Took the fighter through maneuvers that the laws of physics, rolled beneath a Dominion capital ship, and fired weapons directly at its vulnerable reactor core. The capital ship shuddered, lost power, and began to fall from orbit. The people below watched in awe as the massive vessel fell toward the atmosphere, glowing red from friction. It was a Dominion ship, the weapon that had been meant to destroy them, and it was falling from the sky like a defeated god. General Robert Hayes commanded human forces on the ground across 12 different continents. He coordinated with commanders and alien forces from 5 different species. Each military understood a different form of warfare, but they all understood the common goal. They would hold the line. They would protect the civilians. They would die if necessary, but Earth would not fall. A human soldier named Hall was fighting in the ruins of a major city. Dominion troops were advancing, their weapons cutting through building and stone, and his squad took position behind a collapsed building and waited. The Dominion soldiers came forward, confident in their superiority, fired his weapon with precision. 3 Dominion soldiers fell, but more came and more and more. The ammunition in his gun ran out. He had moments to decide whether to run or stand. He stood. He took out his knife and charged at the advancing Dominion line. He knew he would probably die, but he also knew that his squad could use the distraction to escape. They did. The last thing saw was his teammates disappearing into the ruins, safe. He died knowing he had saved his friends. But Hall was not forgotten. His final action was recorded by cameras and transmitted across the global network. His sacrifice inspired thousands. Humans saw one of their own stand against impossible odds. They saw him choose death to save others, and they understood what they were fighting for. A scientist named worked in a secure facility with human researchers. Together, they had developed a countermeasure to Dominion weapons. As the battle raged outside, they worked frantically to deploy the countermeasure across the Alliance's fleet. When the countermeasure was activated, it disrupted Dominion weapons by exactly 1%. 1% seemed small, but in battles determined by fine margins, 1% was the difference between victory and defeat. Dominion pilots found their targeting systems fluctuating. Dominion commanders found their communications slightly delayed. Dominion soldiers found their weapons slightly less effective. 1% compounded across millions of weapons and thousands of soldiers became decisive advantage. In space, the fleet engaged the Dominion armada directly. Ship against ship, weapon against weapon. The battle was brutal and without mercy. But the fighters had something the Dominion had not anticipated. They had human pilots flying alongside them. Humans who had learned tactics and combined them with human improvisation. Humans who took risks that doctrine said were foolish and discovered that foolishness sometimes brought victory. Charlotte was a human scientist who had been working on defensive shield technology. During the battle, she received reports that the shields were failing under Dominion assault. She analyzed the data while explosions echoed through the facility around her. She understood the problem. The shields were failing because they were matching Dominion frequency patterns. She had 70 seconds to write code that would change this. She wrote the code in 63 seconds. She uploaded it to every shield generator across the planet and beyond. The shields retuned. They stopped matching Dominion patterns and instead created entirely new patterns that Dominion weapons could not predict. Dominion bombardment suddenly became half as effective. The turning point came not from a single event but from the accumulation of human choices, from Hall's sacrifice, from his impossible maneuver, from Charlotte's 70 seconds of genius coding, from the soldier who held the line, the pilot who took down a capital ship, the engineer who risked everything for a moment of victory. Humans and their allies did not win the final battle because they had superior technology. They won because they had something the Dominion had lost. They had hope. They had the understanding that their sacrifice meant something. They had each other. After 22 hours of continuous combat, the Dominion fleet began a full retreat. Not just leaving the system, but jumping to distant space. They left behind disabled ships and thousands of soldiers. They left behind the myth of their invincibility. As the last Dominion vessel disappeared into the jump point, a sound erupted across Earth. Cheering, celebration, the cries of humans who had faced the darkness and survived. The cries of alien allies who had believed in something larger than themselves. David emerged from the command center to see the sun rising over a city that was damaged but still standing. Around him, humans and beings from a dozen alien species walked together. They did not look at each other as superior or inferior. They looked at each other as survivors, as equals. Appeared beside David, his features calm but his eyes filled with emotion that No was supposed to experience. "You saved us," said. "Humanity saved the galaxy." "No," David replied. "You saved us first. You believed that one human life was worth saving. That belief changed everything. It changed me. It changed your people. It changed the galaxy." They stood together watching the sun rise higher. Around them, the wounded were being treated. The dead were being honored. The survivors were beginning the long work of rebuilding. A human child walked past them holding the hand of a young. They did not know they were from different species. They only knew that they had survived together. That was all that mattered. That was the future. David thought about the mining colony on 7. He thought about the human he had been, the one who stayed behind so others could live. He thought about his decision to break protocol and save a stranger. That single moment of compassion had echoed across the galaxy, touching billions of lives. The Dominion was defeated. Their empire would crumble under the weight of their own failure. But more importantly, they had proven something to the entire galaxy. Compassion was not weakness. Hope was not a liability. Humans, a species that the Dominion had dismissed as insignificant, had helped save not just themselves but countless worlds and species. Word spread through every communications network in the galaxy. The humans had stood. They had fought beside them. Together, they had defeated the most powerful force in the known universe. From that moment forward, every species that looked at Earth saw not an insignificant planet but the birthplace of hope. And it had all begun because one commander made the choice to answer when a human called for help. Looked at David and spoke the words that would be remembered for the next 1,000 years. You saved a human, and the whole planet rose with you. David smiled, and you saved a human and changed the galaxy forever. The sun continued to rise over Earth. A planet that had once been alone in the darkness now stood at the center of a network of allies. A species that had been dismissed as insignificant had proven themselves to be anything but. The future was uncertain. Rebuilding would take years. The Dominion's allies would still need to be addressed. New threats would emerge, but none of that mattered in this moment. In this moment, Earth had risen. Humanity had proven itself, and the whole galaxy was watching with new respect and understanding. Compassion had won, hope had triumphed, and a single act of kindness had reshaped the course of history. The story of the human and the commander would be told for generations. It would be a reminder that greatness can come from the smallest gestures. That strength lies not in dominance, but in lifting others up. That the future belongs not to the cruel and powerful, but to those brave enough to believe that life is worth saving, even when no one else would. Earth's sun rose higher still, casting light across a world that would never again be unknown or insignificant. The age of humanity among the stars had begun. And on the planet below, humans slept knowing that they had earned their place among the stars through blood and sacrifice, and the unbreakable will to survive. Why watched and waited to see if this unlikely alliance would survive the next trial. The Dominion's ultimatum had not broken the alliance, it had forged it stronger. And somewhere in the darkness of space, more ships were being built, more weapons were being prepared. The next battle would be the largest conflict the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. That the galaxy would soon test whether humans could truly stand together, or whether the old ways of indifference and superiority would win. But David were ready to find out. The story had spread across the galaxy. Now it was time for the galaxy to respond. David Cooper would live to tell his story, and that story would spread across the human worlds like fire, reaching billions of ears. I had saved a human. Someone from the stars had believed a human life was worth saving. The rescue was complete, but the consequences had only begun.